On Korath, where the sky shimmered with colors unknown to Earth and the air itself carried a gentle hum of life, Althea stood in her family's crystal dome. She traced her fingers over the delicate patterns etched into the glass-like walls, her silver skin glowing faintly in the pale sunlight. Her thoughts were as turbulent as the churning seas below. The dome resonated with voices as her parents discussed the news that had arrived earlier. Their conversation was hushed, but Althea didn't need to hear every word to understand its weight. She had been summoned to the council hall, an occurrence rare enough to unsettle her. Althea, her father, Councillor Rineth, said as he approached. His tall frame and dignified posture made him appear almost regal, though his voice was warm. "There is a matter of great importance we must discuss." Her mother, Eloria, stood beside him, her lavender eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. Althea's gaze shifted between them, sensing the gravity of what was to come. "I'm listening," she said, her voice soft but steady. Rineth gestured for her to follow as they walked toward the heart of the dome, where the elders of Korath waited. Each elder wore flowing robes that shimmered like liquid starlight, their presence commanding respect. Althea felt her heart tighten as she stepped into the circle, where she was greeted with kind but serious expressions. One of the elders, Veka, began to speak. His voice carried the wisdom of centuries. The intergalactic accord has been the foundation of peace between Korath and Earth for decades. Now, a proposal has come from their leaders. They wish to strengthen our alliance through a union. Althea's silver skin paled slightly, her glowing veins dimming. "A union," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Rineth stepped forward, his tone gentle yet firm. "Yes, my daughter. A marriage. The Earth Council has chosen one of their most esteemed individuals, a human named Jaren. They believe that such a bond would symbolize the unity between our worlds." The words hung in the air like a heavy mist. Althea's thoughts raced. She had studied humans extensively, seen their lives through holograms, and read their literature. But the idea of living with one, let alone marrying one, felt overwhelming. Humans were unpredictable, ruled by emotions she couldn't fully understand. How could she connect with someone so vastly different? "I cannot," she said, her voice trembling. "Humans, they are not like us. Their ways are strange, their emotions chaotic. How could I possibly?" Eloria placed a reassuring hand on Althea's shoulder. "Not all humans are as you imagine. Perhaps this Jaren is different. You must meet him before you decide." Althea hesitated, the thought of leaving Korath and facing the unknown filling her with unease. But deep within her, a small spark of curiosity flickered. What if her perceptions of humans were wrong? What if this Jaren was unlike anything she had expected? After a long silence, she finally nodded. "I will meet him," she said quietly. "But I make no promises." The elders exchanged approving glances, and Rineth smiled faintly. "That is all we ask, Althea. Open your mind, and let the stars guide your heart." As the meeting concluded, Althea returned to her quarters, her mind swirling with uncertainty. Standing by her window, she gazed out at the endless expanse of Koratha's crystalline landscape. The stars above seemed to twinkle with silent encouragement, as if urging her forward. Tomorrow, she would leave for Earth, a world she had only observed from afar. She didn't know what awaited her there, but one thing was certain: her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. "You said." The Korathian vessel hummed softly as it descended through the thick atmosphere of Earth. Althea stood near the observation window, her gaze fixed on the blue-green planet. The view was stunning yet foreign to her. Clouds swirled like soft brushstrokes over vast oceans, and patches of land gleamed under the sunlight. Earth was alive with a wildness that Korath lacked, a raw, untamed beauty that made her heart ache with a mix of awe and apprehension. As the ship broke through the final layer of clouds, the pilot's voice echoed in the cabin. "We will be landing in a secure area designated by Earth's Council. Prepare for arrival." Althea took a deep breath, her glowing silver skin dimming slightly as her anxiety grew. She adjusted the flowing robe she wore, its fabric shimmering like starlight. It was a traditional Korathian garment, meant to symbolize grace and harmony. She hoped it would also serve as a barrier, protecting her from the unfamiliar world she was about to enter. When the ship finally touched down, the ramp lowered with a soft hiss. Warm air rushed in, carrying scents she couldn't quite place, earthy, floral, and faintly metallic. Althea hesitated at the threshold, her heart racing. This was it, the first step into a world she had only read about in data archives and seen in holographic simulations. She stepped out onto a lush meadow surrounded by towering trees. The sky above was a soft shade of blue, with the sun casting golden rays that warmed her skin. A small delegation waited a few meters away, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect. At the front of the group stood a man, tall, with broad shoulders and a confident yet calm demeanor. Jaren. He wasn't what she had expected. His features were sharp but softened by a genuine warmth in his expression. His dark hair was slightly tousled by the breeze, and his amber eyes held a glow that felt oddly familiar, almost like the luminescence of her own people. Jaren stepped forward, his movements unhurried. His gaze met hers, and he offered a small smile. "Althea," he said, his voice steady yet soft, "welcome to Earth. It's an honor to meet you." She blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. Her studies had taught her to expect formality, perhaps even stiffness, but Jaren's words felt human. Genuine. She hesitated before extending her hand in the traditional Quarathian greeting, her delicate fingers trembling slightly. When his hand met hers, the warmth of his touch startled her. She quickly withdrew, her glowing veins pulsing faintly with her nerves. "The honor is mutual," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. The delegation exchanged polite words before leading them to a sleek transport vehicle. As they traveled through winding roads, Althea watched the landscape pass by. The trees, the rivers, the distant mountains, it was all so vivid, so alive. She couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward the wild beauty of Earth, even as her anxiety simmered beneath the surface. The vehicle came to a stop in front of a grand estate surrounded by sprawling gardens. The building was a blend of modern architecture and old-world charm, with large windows that reflected the golden hues of the setting sun. Althea stepped out, her gaze sweeping over her new surroundings. "This will be your home during your stay," Jaren said, gesturing toward the estate. His voice was calm, but there was a subtle nervousness in his posture, an uncertainty that mirrored her own. "I hope you find it comfortable." She nodded, unsure of what to say. The silence between them was filled with unspoken questions, both of them unsure how to bridge the vast gulf between their worlds. Inside, the estate was just as impressive as its exterior. The rooms were spacious and filled with light, decorated with earth artifacts that spoke of history and culture. Althea's quarters had been prepared with care, soft fabrics draped over the bed, and a vase of fresh flowers sat on a table near the window. It was thoughtful, yet she felt a pang of discomfort at the unfamiliarity of it all. As the day wore on, Jaren approached her in the garden, where she had retreated to find solace among the greenery. He stood a respectful distance away, his hands clasped behind his back. "I know this must be overwhelming," he began, his tone gentle. "I can't imagine what it's like to leave your world behind and come here. But I hope we can make this experience easier. For both of us." Althea turned to face him, her silver skin glinting in the soft light of the setting sun. "It is overwhelming," she admitted, her voice tinged with honesty. "Your world is beautiful, but it's so different. I don't know if I belong here." "You don't have to decide that now," Jaren said, taking a small step closer. "We have time. All I ask is that we take this one day at a time." His words were simple, yet they carried a sincerity that made her chest tighten. She studied his face, searching for any sign of pretense, but all she found was patience and kindness. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Althea felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name, something that whispered, maybe he's not like the others. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in hues of orange and pink, Althea found herself wondering if perhaps Earth held more than just challenges. Perhaps it held possibilities she had yet to discover. The days on Earth passed with a strange rhythm for Althea. Each morning, she would wake to the sound of birds singing, a sound that felt both chaotic and harmonious. The light here was different from Quaritha's soft glow. It was bold, golden, and alive. But what unsettled her most was Jaren. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, human or Quarathian. He was attentive without being overbearing, curious without prying, and always seemed to carry an unspoken understanding of her hesitations. This both intrigued and unnerved her. One afternoon, Jaren invited her to explore the estate grounds. The day was warm, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. As they walked through the gardens, Althea couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Jaren moved through his world. He seemed in tune with the land, his steps purposeful yet relaxed. "I've read about your people's gardens," Jaren said, breaking the silence. "They sound incredible, living sculptures that adapt and change with the seasons." "They are," Althea replied, her voice soft but steady. "Our gardens are connected to our energy. They respond to our emotions, growing in harmony with our state of being." Jaren looked at her with genuine fascination. "That's beautiful. I think Earth could use something like that. Gardens that reflect how we feel." She tilted her head, her silver hair catching the sunlight. "Wouldn't that be chaotic? Humans feel so many emotions at once. Your gardens might grow wild and unpredictable." Jaren laughed, a sound that startled her at first but soon made her lips twitch in an almost smile. "You're probably right," he said. "But maybe that's the beauty of it. Sometimes chaos can be freeing." Althea fell silent, pondering his words. Chaos was something she had always avoided, something her people viewed as disruptive. But here on Earth, chaos seemed to have its own rhythm, its own strange kind of order. Later that evening, Jaren suggested they share a meal. He led her to a cozy dining room where a table had been set with a mix of human and Korathian dishes. The effort to include her culture touched her more than she expected. "I wasn't sure what you'd like," Jaren admitted, sitting across from her. "So I had the chefs study Korathian cuisine. I hope it's close enough." She took a bite of a dish that resembled the nutrient-rich blooms from her home. It wasn't perfect, but the flavors were thoughtful, and that mattered more than the taste. "It's good," she said, a small smile gracing her lips. "Thank you." Jaren leaned back, relief softening his features. "I'm glad. I wanted you to feel at home, even if it's just a little." As they ate, their conversation deepened. Jaren spoke of Earth's history, its triumphs and struggles, while Althea shared stories of Koratha's ancient traditions. Their differences were stark, but instead of creating distance, they seemed to draw them closer. At one point, Jaren hesitated before asking, "Do you miss Korath?" The question caught her off guard. She set down her utensil, her glowing veins pulsing faintly as she considered her answer. "I do," she admitted. "But not as much as I thought I would. Your world is overwhelming, but it's also fascinating. There's a rawness to it that we don't have on Korath." Jaren smiled softly. "Earth has its flaws, but I think that's part of what makes it special. It's imperfect, but it keeps growing, keeps trying." His words stayed with her long after the meal ended. That night, as she sat by her window, watching the stars, she found herself thinking about Jaren. He was so different from what she had imagined a human would be, gentler, more thoughtful. She still didn't fully understand him, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of trust. The following day, Jaren surprised her by inviting her to join him on a walk through the nearby forest. The towering trees and dappled sunlight reminded her of Koratha's bioluminescent groves, though the earthy scent of the soil was distinctly earthly. As they walked, Jaren suddenly stopped and pointed to a clearing ahead. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice laced with excitement. Althea followed him to the clearing, where a small stream wound its way through moss-covered stones. The sunlight danced on the water's surface, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jaren crouched by the stream, dipping his hand into the cool water. "This place has always been my refuge. Whenever life feels overwhelming, I come here. It reminds me that even in chaos, there's peace to be found." Althea knelt beside him, her silver skin glinting in the sunlight. She hesitated before reaching out to touch the water, her fingers brushing against the surface. The sensation was strange yet soothing. "Do you ever feel afraid?" she asked suddenly, surprising even herself. Jaren looked at her, his amber eyes steady. "Of course. Fear is part of being human. But I've learned that fear isn't always a bad thing. It means you're stepping into something new, something that matters." Althea's chest tightened. She had spent so much of her life avoiding fear, seeing it as a weakness. But here was Jaren, embracing it as a sign of growth. It was a perspective she hadn't considered before. As they sat by the stream, the barrier between them began to dissolve. For the first time, Althea felt a sense of connection, not just to Jaren, but to the world around her. The trees, the water, the sunlight, it all felt alive, vibrant, and full of possibilities. When they returned to the estate, Althea found herself smiling, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. Perhaps Jaren was right. Perhaps fear wasn't something to be avoided but something to be faced, step by step, one moment at a time. The days turned into weeks, and Althea found herself settling into a strange rhythm on Earth. Though she still felt like an outsider, Jaren's presence made the transition bearable, almost comforting. He had an uncanny ability to sense when she needed space and when she needed companionship. One morning, as Althea sat in the garden, soaking in the sun's warmth, Jaren approached with an object in his hands. It was rectangular, wrapped in a soft cloth. "I thought you might like this," he said, setting it on the stone bench beside her. "What is it?" she asked, her silver eyes narrowing in curiosity. He unwrapped the object, revealing a book. Its cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. "It's a collection of Earth poetry. I thought it might help you understand how humans see the world." Althea ran her fingers over the cover, the texture rough against her smooth skin. "Poetry," she echoed. "We have nothing like this on Quorath. Poetry is how we make sense of emotions we can't fully explain," Jaren said, sitting down beside her. "It's a way to capture what words alone can't express." She opened the book, her fingers brushing the delicate pages. The words inside were strange yet beautiful, each line carrying a weight that tugged at something deep within her. She read a verse aloud, her voice soft. "The stars above are silent friends, whispering truths that never end. In their glow we find our way, through the night to greet the day." The rhythm of the words stirred something unfamiliar in her chest. She glanced at Jaren, her expression unguarded for the first time. It feels alive," she said, her voice tinged with wonder. "That's the magic of it," Jaren replied, smiling. "It connects us, even when we're worlds apart." For a moment, the garden fell silent, save for the gentle rustle of leaves. Althea felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. Perhaps humans were not as alien as she had believed. Over time, Jaren continued to surprise her. He shared more of Earth's culture, music, art, and stories that spoke of love, loss, and hope. Althea found herself drawn to his passion, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about things he cared for. One evening, Jaren invited her to a nearby festival. It was a celebration of Earth's changing seasons, filled with music, lights, and laughter. Althea hesitated at first, the thought of being surrounded by so many humans daunting. But Jaren's gentle encouragement convinced her to go. The festival was a sensory overload. Lanterns hung from trees, their soft glow illuminating the night. Stalls lined the streets, offering food, crafts, and trinkets. Music filled the air, a lively melody that made her veins pulse with curiosity. Jaren stayed by her side, guiding her through the crowd with quiet reassurance. He introduced her to simple pleasures, sweet treats that melted on her tongue, handcrafted jewelry that sparkled in the lantern light. At one point, they stopped by a group of dancers moving in sync to the music. Jaren turned to her, a playful smile on his lips. "Would you like to dance?" Althea's glowing skin dimmed slightly in embarrassment. I've never danced before." "Neither have I," he admitted, extending his hand. "But that's part of the fun. No one's watching, just us." After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his. He led her to the edge of the dancers, where they began to move awkwardly to the music. At first, Althea felt self-conscious, her movements stiff and uncertain. But as Jaren spun her gently, she couldn't help but laugh, a sound that surprised even her. The laughter broke the tension, and soon they were moving more freely. Jaren's grin was infectious, his amber eyes glowing with joy. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Althea felt a lightness she hadn't known she was capable of. As the festival wound down, they found themselves sitting by a quiet fountain, the distant hum of music fading into the night. Althea leaned back, gazing at the stars. They looked different from Quoratha's skies, but there was a familiarity in their twinkle that comforted her. "Thank you," she said softly, breaking the silence. Jaren looked at her, his expression tender. "For what?" "For tonight," she replied, her voice steady. For showing me your world, for being patient with me. You don't need to thank me, he said, his tone warm. You've shown me just as much. You've made me see things differently, made me appreciate what I've always taken for granted. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the space between them seemed to disappear. Althea felt a flutter in her chest, a sensation both terrifying and exhilarating. Althea, Jaren said, his voice soft. I know this isn't easy for you. But I want you to know. I'm glad you're here. Her heart raced, her glowing veins pulsing faintly. I'm glad too, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. As the stars above bore silent witness, a fragile bond began to form between them. It wasn't yet love, but it was something that held the promise of more. Althea had always been taught to guard her emotions. On Quorath, vulnerability was seen as a crack in the armor of self-control. But here on Earth, emotions were celebrated, even revered. Humans didn't just feel, they lived through their emotions, wearing them like badges of honor. It fascinated her, but it also terrified her. As the weeks unfolded, Jaren seemed determined to show her that vulnerability wasn't a weakness but a strength. He had a way of coaxing her out of her shell, his gentle persistence a quiet rebellion against her self-imposed walls. One evening, as a soft rain fell outside, Jaren knocked on the door of her study. Althea looked up from the datapad she was reading, her silver hair shimmering under the warm light. Come in, she said. Jaren stepped inside, holding a wooden box in his hands. His amber eyes sparkled with mischief. I thought you might enjoy something new tonight, he said, placing the box on the table in front of her. What is it? She asked, tilting her head in curiosity. He opened the lid to reveal an assortment of small, brightly colored objects. Earth calls it painting, he explained. It's a way of expressing yourself without words. Althea's glowing veins pulsed faintly as she reached out to touch one of the objects, a brush, its bristles soft against her fingers. And what am I supposed to paint? Anything you want, Jaren said with a grin. There are no rules. The idea of no rules unsettled her, but Jaren's excitement was infectious. He set up a canvas and handed her a palette, showing her how to mix the colors. Tentatively, she dipped the brush into a vibrant blue and made her first stroke. At first, her movements were hesitant, the lines uneven. But as the colors began to blend and take shape, something shifted. She lost herself in the rhythm of the brush, the way the colors flowed together like whispers of emotion. Jaren watched her with quiet admiration, occasionally adding his own strokes to a separate canvas. They worked in companionable silence, the sound of rain tapping against the window their only soundtrack. When they finally stepped back to look at their creations, Althea couldn't help but laugh. Her painting was an abstract swirl of blues and silvers, reminiscent of Quoratha's glowing groves. Jaren's, on the other hand, was a chaotic mix of colors that somehow formed a sunset over a mountain. It's chaotic, Althea said, her voice tinged with amusement. That's the point, Jaren replied, smiling. Chaos can be beautiful. She looked at him, her silver eyes softening. Thank you for this, she said quietly. For showing me something new. Any time, he said, his tone gentle. As the days turned into months, their bond deepened. Jaren's patience and kindness slowly chipped away at Althea's reservations. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, their shared meals, and the quiet moments when words weren't necessary. One afternoon, as they walked through the forest, Jaren asked her a question that caught her off guard. What was it like, growing up on Quorath? Althea hesitated, her glowing veins dimming slightly as she searched for the right words. It was structured, she said finally. Everything had a purpose, a place. There was little room for spontaneity or emotion. That sounds lonely, Jaren said softly. It wasn't meant to be, she replied. But sometimes it was. Jaren stopped walking and turned to face her. You're not alone anymore, Althea, he said, his voice steady. Her chest tightened at his words. The sincerity in his amber eyes made her feel exposed, as though he could see the parts of her she kept hidden. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. To let someone in. You don't have to know, Jaren said. You just have to try. I'll be here, no matter how long it takes. Something in his words broke through the last of her defenses. She stepped closer, her silver eyes searching his face. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why do you care so much?" "Because I see you," Jaren said simply. "Not just who you are, but who you could be, if you let yourself feel." Althea's glowing veins pulsed brightly, the closest a Korathian could come to tears. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope, a fragile but growing belief that maybe, just maybe, she could be more than what her world had taught her to be. That night, as they sat by the fire in the estate's library, Althea found herself leaning closer to Jaren. The flickering flames cast warm shadows across his face, and she felt an ache in her chest that she couldn't quite name. "Jaren," she said softly, her voice trembling. He turned to her, his expression open and unguarded. "Yes." "Thank you," she said, her voice steadying, "for showing me that there's more to life than fear." He smiled, a quiet warmth in his eyes. "You've shown me just as much, Althea. You've reminded me to see the beauty in things I'd forgotten." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The space between them felt charged, filled with unspoken words and emotions too new to name. As the fire crackled softly, Althea realized that the walls she had built were no longer as impenetrable as they once were. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. The crisp morning air carried a promise of change. Althea stood on the balcony of her room, gazing at the horizon where the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Earth was unpredictable, chaotic, and raw, yet it had grown on her, much like the human who had reshaped her perceptions of life. Her communicator buzzed faintly. It was a message from the Korathian Council, a reminder that her time on Earth was nearing its end. The proposed alliance was now in her hands, her final report due soon. She felt a strange ache at the thought of leaving, one that settled heavily in her chest. As if sensing her turmoil, Jaren appeared below in the garden, his amber eyes catching the morning light. "Althea," he called up, his voice warm. "Come down. There's something I want to show you." She hesitated before descending the stairs, her silver hair gleaming like liquid light. When she reached him, he held out a small, intricate device. It was a hollow projector, modified with Earth technology. "What is this?" she asked, curious. "It's a gift," Jaren said, activating the device. A three-dimensional image sprang to life, a swirling blend of Korathian groves and Earth's wild landscapes. The two worlds merged seamlessly, creating a vision of harmony. Althea's glowing veins brightened as she studied the projection. "You made this." "With some help," Jaren admitted. "I wanted you to see what our worlds could be together, not just in an alliance, but truly united." Her chest tightened, emotions swirling within her. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jaren stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "Althea, I know your people value logic and reason. But I need to tell you something that doesn't fit neatly into those rules." She turned to face him, her silver eyes meeting his steady gaze. "I care about you," Jaren said, his words steady despite the vulnerability in his tone. "More than I thought possible. And I know this isn't easy for you, but I need you to know how I feel." Althea's breath hitched. On Korath, emotions were carefully controlled, never shared so openly. But here Jaren was, laying his heart bare without hesitation. "Jaren," she began, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can give you what you want. My people." "I don't care about your people's rules," Jaren interrupted gently. "I care about you, Althea. Not as an ambassador or a representative, but as the person you've become." Tears, a rare and vulnerable sign of emotion for her, threatened to well in her silver eyes. "You've changed me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've shown me that there's more to life than duty. But I'm afraid." He reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. "Fear isn't the enemy," he said softly. "It's what you do with it that matters. Let it guide you, not control you." That evening, Althea sent her final report to the Korathian Council. Her words were uncharacteristically bold, advocating not just for an alliance but for a deeper integration of their worlds. She described Earth's beauty, its flaws, and its potential. Most importantly, she spoke of the bond she had formed with Jaren, a bond that transcended logic. The Council's response was swift and unexpected. They agreed to extend her stay indefinitely, recognizing that her experience had provided insights no formal diplomacy could achieve. When she shared the news with Jaren, his smile was brighter than any sunrise she had seen. "You're staying?" he asked, hope flickering in his eyes. "For now," she said, her own smile soft but genuine. "I think there's more I need to learn, about your world. And about us." Months passed, and their bond deepened into something neither of them had fully anticipated. Althea began to see the world not as an alien visitor but as someone who belonged. She embraced the chaos, the emotions, and the imperfections, finding beauty in the unexpected. One evening, as they stood by the same stream where Jaren had first spoken of finding peace in chaos, he turned to her with an almost shy expression. "I've been thinking about something," he began, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "What is it?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, delicate ring, a blend of Korathian metals and Earth's gemstones. The design was simple yet elegant, a perfect fusion of their two worlds. "I know this is unconventional," he said, his amber eyes locked on hers. "But I want to spend my life learning from you, with you. Althea, will you marry me?" Her glowing veins pulsed brightly, her emotions too overwhelming to contain. For a moment, she was silent, the weight of his question settling over her. And then, with a voice steadier than she expected, she said, "Yes." Jaren's smile was radiant, and as he slipped the ring onto her finger, Althea felt a sense of belonging she had never known. Their love was a bridge between two worlds, proof that even the most unlikely bonds could flourish. Together, they faced an uncertain future, not as alien and human, but as partners, united by a love that transcended stars.